What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. Welcome to our daily show where we discuss everything going on here in our country, in Washington, D.C., the stimulus check update, the fourth stimulus package update, everything you need to know about on a daily basis. Money, investing, the stock market, which had an absolutely terrible day. It crashed today, but everything you need to know about on a daily basis. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet today, make sure to subscribe. It's completely free to do so. New videos come out here every day at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will keep you up to date with everything going on that you need to know about. And thank you so much for hitting the like button for us as well. You guys are absolutely amazing. There is a situation that is growing to be larger and larger at the US-Canada border over the vaccine mandates. You can see here Elon Musk and Trump praised the Canadian trucker vaccine protest that police say spurred investigation into threatening and illegal behavior. And you can also see here that Canada's Freedom Convoy truckers have blocked routes into the US and is causing supply chain issues back into the US. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's vaccine mandates is causing a major concern for supply chains and possibly more inflation because goods cannot cross back into the border. And yeah, you can't make this stuff up, right? Justin Trudeau, of Canada's prime minister, said that he was not intimidated by the truckers, but recent indications say that they might be willing to speak with the truckers and potentially lift some of the vaccine mandates on the truckers who are not happy with this if they stop the blockade, if they remove the blockade. This is a growing concern, and you can see here this article says that truckers in the US may follow their Canadian counterparts with demonstrations against these mandates. So, yeah, this is causing even more supply chain concerns. And the question is, will they, or will these countries, the U.S. and Canada, be able to solve these current trucker protests? Yeah, so we are seeing this right now with hundreds of truckers that are basically protesting to work and not move the trucks and the blockages. You could see here they've completely blocked these passages, and until these mandates are removed. So we have a very interesting predicament here. So let me know your thoughts on this, and I will keep you up to date. Meanwhile, President Biden said that they got and killed a major ISIS leader here today in a raid in Syria. President Biden announced earlier today that the U.S. raid in Syria on Wednesday killed the leader of the ISIS Islamic State terrorist group, Abu Ibrahim al-Hislami. Good luck saying this name, right? Al-Qawashi. So apparently he may have been the leader. And here's what Biden had to say.
We do know that as our troops approached to capture the terrorist, in a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow up that third floor, rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed, taking several members of his family with him, just as his predecessor did.
Biden said the operation in northwest Syria was successful and resulted in no American casualties in a statement Thursday morning. In later remarks from the White House, Biden said that that al-Qawashi blew himself up and members of his family in the operation in a, quote, final act of desperate cowardice. Last night, quote, Operation on my order, the U.S. military forces successfully removed a major terrorist threat to the world, the global leader of ISIS. Biden said in prepared remarks from the Roosevelt Room, this horrible terrorist leader is no more. Wow. Wow, I guess this is something that has been years in the making. It seems like this will just be something that is never ending, right? Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think that this is the end? Do you think this is something that we'll always be having to deal with? Yeah, let me know your thoughts here in the comments. On the stimulus package update, Pramila Jayapal says today, leader of the Democratic Progressive Caucus, that we need to move swift and urgently to get something done, especially in the Senate, and they need to move to get a package done here swift and urgently. So they need to be moving to get something done and come to a compromise to get something done for the American people. Also, I want to say if you were watching my last video where we talked about how there's going to be potentially dozens of state stimulus checks coming out this year, I showed a news clip video for state of California. If you were one of my early watchers, when that video came out, you've seen that news clip for the state of California. That you got to see that. Well, the way kind of YouTube works is I'm allowed to show news clips. So my go-to channels, um, I say go-to channels just because I know that I can show them without copyright claims. Copyright claims are a little bit tricky with YouTube. So the rule is if they're news clips, you're supposed to be allowed to show them on YouTube because news clips do not really fall under copyright claim. But the way, I know this is a little bit tricky here, but anybody can claim a copyright and then you can dispute it, okay? Or you can just trim that part out of your video because disputing it, you have to go through this whole process and it's very time consuming and et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to go through this whole process, right? So basically when I go through well-known channels like CNN or Fox News or like MSNBC or NBC or anything like that, those well-known channels don't really claim copyright because they know how the rule works. Fox News has done a few of them from me in the past, but recently they have been pretty good. But generally, the major news stations don't. Well, I showed that clip about California stimulus checks potentially coming out this year to over 27 million people, and they filed a copyright claim on it pretty quickly, within an hour or two of my video showing. So I trimmed it out. So if you watched my video, my last video about new stimulus checks coming, because there's going to be probably over a dozen states and even more so coming later this year as more and more states announce this, you might not get to see that part of the video. So if you're wondering hey, Jimmy, you said that there's a video clip coming and then you don't get to see that, it's because I had to trim it out. So that kind of might make sense on why you didn't get to see the California part if you didn't watch it at first. But that's just kind of a little bit of insight to how our channel works because this is kind of like a whole video production. And it's just easier for me to trim it out than to go through the whole dispute process. It's a time-consuming nightmare. Even though I'm technically right, I have the right to show news clips because it's news. That's the general rule. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of insight. So if you ever go to watch one of my videos and it's here, watch this, and then there's no video there, it's a rare occurrence. But that might be why you might not see a video clip there if the rare times something is missing. Just figured I'd let you tell you that. If you're a regular watcher of my channel and you're sometimes missing a video clip there, that might be the reason why. So I figured I'd let you know that. So with that being said, here is a video clip of a Democratic Congressman, Ro Khanna, speaking here on the stimulus package, Senator Joe Manchin, and several things relevant here. So check this out.
Democratic member of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He is the author of the new book titled Dignity in a Digital Age, Making Tech Work for All of Us. Congressman, it's great to have you here with us. You've been listening patiently to our conversation and to Brian Deese there. What is your view of where the focus should be of Democrats in this midterm year? You've sort of had interesting takes on Senator Manchin, for example, where you said, I understand what he's dealing with. He's running in West Virginia, in a state that voted for Donald Trump overwhelmingly. Some of your progressive colleagues have suggested he be primaried. What do you think that your party should be looking at on the hopes of holding on to a House? You've had retirements. It doesn't look good at this moment from the outside.
Well, I'm still cautiously hopeful, but we ought to respect Senator Manchin. We ought to understand where he's coming from. We ought to give him the deference of coming up with what he wants. And he's going to propose climate investments. He's going to say, let's have preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old. He's going to be for Medicaid expansion. Let's pass that. That will be historic. It'll show we can get something done. I think we ought to get it to the president's desk. So I have a lot of respect for him, and I think we can come to a compromise. Go ahead.
When you look at these massive pieces of legislation like Build Back Better, how are you viewing it? We're just talking to one of your colleagues, Congressman Schneider of Illinois, and he said he'd like to see it get through however he can, and maybe that does mean pulling all these popular pieces out of it and voting on them one by one. What's your view of that legislation?
I think we can get a narrow version centered on climate that all 51 senators, including Senator Manchin, can support, and we get that through. And then other things we can do one by one, such as expanding the child tax credit or a $15 wage or paid family leave. But we have to be flexible. People want to see we can get things done. The other thing, which Brian Deese mentioned, I mean, he mentioned it as one point, but the entire Democratic Party should descend to New Albany, Ohio, and talk about the 3,000 manufacturing jobs that are being created there. Talk about the 7,000 construction jobs. Intel in my district investing in the heartland. This is economic revival. I mean, if it were Donald Trump with the carrier deal, it was like 600 jobs and all he could talk about. Or Foxconn in Wisconsin. Why isn't the whole Democratic Party in New Albany, Ohio, saying we're revitalizing the heartland of America? It's not about this statistics and this provision and this legislation. That's not how politics works. Politics is about stories. We have to tell our story.
Joe, it's something we talk about on this show. There's too much talk about process. Too many members of Congress out talking to members of the press out in the halls and not going out in the country and talking about things that they've passed historically huge pieces of legislation in the last 12 months.
Well, yeah, and he is singing our song. Congressman, you're singing our song. We talk about it all the time. Just as observers, whether you're supporting Democrats or supporting Republicans or just looking at it, if Donald Trump had this economy over the past year, if Donald Trump had this stock market over the past year, if Donald Trump had the record growth in jobs over the past year, if Donald Trump had the GDP that Biden's White House had over the past year, it's literally all we would talk about. And you touch on this. You touch on this plant in Ohio. This is extraordinarily important, not just for the future of our economy, but to our national security. Why aren't Democrats talking about it more?
We need you out on the campaign trail, Joe. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Semiconductors. You want to talk about inflation? Part of the reason for inflation is that we were dependent on semiconductors coming from South Korea, coming from Taiwan. Republicans talk about China, 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 and the threat. We're actually doing something about it. We're putting semiconductor manufacturing in Ohio. Talk to folks in Ohio. They're so excited about this. Their kids now aren't going to have to buy one-way tickets out of the community, out of the state. They get to stay in that community. They get good-paying jobs. And by the way, these aren't the coding jobs in my district. These aren't go become a coder. These are manufacturing jobs. These are the new construction jobs. $20 billion investment there. It's more than Donald Trump did for, quote unquote, the forgotten Americans in his whole 4 years. This president is delivering, and we're not out there. We're not telling the story. We ought to be telling the story as opposed to talking about abstract legislation and numbers and data and inflation. Have people in that plant who are going to get jobs talk about what this means to them and their kids.
Mighty Democrats, if you're talking about Joe Biden, if you're talking about Joe Manchin, you're losing. And unfortunately, that's the obsession instead of what's going on in Ohio, what's going on the stock market, what's going on, in this economy. Let me ask you a couple quick questions about Silicon Valley, something you know a good bit about. Let's first of all talk about monopolies. We really are in the age, the Gilded Age, the second Gilded Age, and you've got Facebook. You've got Google, who completely control advertising in their space. Not Apple so much, but those two companies especially. Microsoft also. a budding monopoly there as well. What can Congress, what can the president do to break these monopolies up and allow entrepreneurs, more entrepreneurs, not just in Silicon Valley, but across America, to actually start competing with these massive, massive corporations?
Well, Joe, I agree with you. We need antitrust legislation that doesn't allow them to privilege their own products, that doesn't allow them to discriminate against sellers. Here's why it matters. People say, well, I don't pay anything to use Facebook. I don't pay anything to use Google. Why am I being harmed? But as you pointed out, there are two harms. One, the small businesses are paying for the advertisement, and they don't have much choice. They're only going to a couple places. So it's hurting small businesses. Second, if you want to decentralize tech, if you want tech to start in Ohio and other places, you can't just have two big or three big companies. You need to have strong antitrust enforcement. I think we're going to get it done in Congress. Senator Klobuchar has a strong start on a bill, and I certainly support strong antitrust legislation.
Yeah, well, speaking about Facebook being more competitive in the marketplace, they dropped 26% their stock. They're called Meta now because they're trying to rebrand into Meta, which in my opinion is a mistake because they're just trying to be more than Facebook because, they own Instagram and stuff like that. Now, their stock dropped 26% in one day today, which is for a huge company like Facebook or Meta is absolutely massive. That was a loss of like $200 billion. 200 billion. That's absolutely one. I think it's one of the largest, if not the largest, one-day drop for a company ever. Yeah, you can see after hours, it's up like 1% here. But disregard that. This is the big one, down 26% in one day. This actually took down almost the whole stock market here today. You could see the Dow was down 518 points. The NASDAQ down twice as much, 538 points. But remember, the NASDAQ is, they're on different scales. The NASDAQ was down almost 4% here today. It was an absolutely just massive, massive beating today in the stock market. Just a huge, huge loss today. This was after 4 days of gains here in the stock market. A complete, just absolute, just massive drop. I don't even know any other way to say it. And real quick, I'll give you a little bit of insights. I had a viewer ask me, Jimmy, how much did you lose last week in your stock holdings? Especially if you own something like an index fund, like an S&P index fund or a Vanguard Total Stock or something like that, where you just own a piece of everything, which is a great way to own stocks. Or if you didn't own Facebook in particular, or even if you did, if you own Google, Amazon, Tesla, anything like that, how much did you lose, Jimmy? And my answer would be I lost nothing. And how could that be? Well, the answer is because I didn't sell anything. If you look at the big scheme of everything, if you've been an investor, and not that I'm like bragging or anything, because I'm not, but over 50% of Americans are, quote, investors nowadays because people have 401ks, pensions, money in the stock market. Over 50% of people have money in the stock markets nowadays. And you heard them mention that if President Trump had Biden's stock market last year, that's all they would hear about. Last year, in 2021, the S&P 500 had gained 27% last year. So it's a great place to put your money. And when the stock market is down, it's actually a great time to buy. Remember, you want to buy low and sell high, or even better, just buy and hold is the best time to do it. You don't want to sell when the market is panicking. You really just want to buy and hold, and I'll show you why. This is just a tried and proven strategy. This is Warren Buffett's strategy. This is just a buy and hold strategy. Here's the S&P 500, right? When you look at a 1 day or 5 days, like I said, it's been up for 4 days in a row here. But when you look at something like on, this is a year to date. So, basically a 1 month, it looks like it's down, right? Down a little bit here. But when you look at, like I said, they were up 27% over the last year in the S&P 500. Okay, but the problem is if you look at a little dip like this, and you say, oh my God, the market's falling. How much did you lose, Jimmy? Or how much did you lose last week? If you look at this one little dip right here on the screen, again, over 50% of people in the U.S. have money in the stock market now. If you sell right here in this dip, or if you sell right here in this dip, or if you sell right here in this dip, of course you're going to end up a quote loser if you sell and you panic every time there's a little dip. This is just a 1-year chart, okay? If we look at a 5-year chart, okay, this was when everybody thought the world was collapsing because of the pandemic. That was actually a slightly different time because the country was actually closing down. That was actually a much scarier time because that was the first time we ever actually closed down. That was a scary time, but even then, look at the dip and look at what continued. If you look at just the linear graph here, this is a good lesson for everybody. This actually taught me a lesson here. This is a good history lesson for everybody. I learned a lot in this history lesson. History teaches us a lesson, okay? History taught me a lesson here. This is history teaching all of us a lesson. Look at the history here. Look at the history here. It's a nice linear scale that goes up a little bit over time. And yes, there are dips in the market, especially when a pandemic hits and the whole country closes down. That was actually the best time to buy. Whenever the market crashes, it's actually the hardest time to buy. You think that the world's going to end, you think that the market's going to crash. It's always the best time to buy. Well, last week when everybody was panicking and the market was down like 10%, that's just a little dip in the market. This is a 5-year graph, by the way. This is a 5-year graph. I mean, over 5 years, 5 years ago, the S&P 500 was at 2,300. Now it's at 4,500. That's about double your money. So in 5 years, you doubled your money. So if you had $10,000 in a 401k, it's now worth double. If you had $100,000 in your retirement fund, it's now double. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That's in 5 years. When you look at the maximum here, back to 1985 here in this graph, the S&P 500 was at 189. Now it's at 4,500. If you want to do the math, I don't even know, I can't even do that math in my head, but it's gone from 189 to 4,500. That's an exponential gain. It's an exponential gain, okay? Or if we look at the Dow Jones here, the Dow Jones back in 1992 was 3,300, and now it's worth 35,000, okay? Basically for one share, okay? So it's worth 10 times more. It's worth 10 times more since 1992. And this is how your money grows, okay? This is why the old saying of the rich get rich and the poor get poorer is because the quote rich, and I'm not picking on anybody here, I'm just kind of saying that this is how money works, right? The rich, or the people that have their money grow for them, they put money in stocks, they put money in investments, okay? And the people that don't have their money grow for them are people that don't invest any money, okay? Or the credit card companies actually do the reverse on you. What they do is they make you pay interest, okay? What they do is the opposite. So if you're paying 10 or 20% on a credit card, you're doing the opposite of your money. So instead of having your money grow, your money is doing the reverse. Your money is actually doing a reverse graph there. You're paying 10 or 20% a year interest instead of having your money grow at 10 or 20% a year. Remember, last year the stock market grew at 27%. Okay. Now remember, the stocks they grow like this. Okay. Every year is different. Some years they might grow at 5%. Some years they might grow at 27%. Some years they might grow at negative 5 or 10%. But then the year after they'll grow at 20%. Okay. Remember, they kind of grow at this, but over the graph, over the long term, they grow at a at a growth rate like that. You just seen the graph, right? But the key is to not panic and not sell when you get 1 week or 1 month or even 6 months of a downturn. But you kind of have to be okay with keeping your money in there. If you need your money like that, if you need your money next week, you probably don't put your money in the market, right? You got to kind of be okay with having your money in there. That's why having your money in a 401k or a Roth, having your money in retirement funds or different buckets of money. If I haven't talked about this in a while, but I have a 3 bucket money system. Maybe I'll talk about later in another video more in depth, where you have different buckets of money. Your first bucket of money is the money you need right now to pay your bills. Your second bucket of money is money that um, is kind of in savings, but you might need it in the short term to pay your bills. Okay, so maybe if you might need it in the next month or so, maybe you need it. And your third bucket of money is your retirement money or money down the line that you might need. So you can invest it, but you definitely don't need to go get it next month, right? Okay, so you have different buckets of money, assuming that that you have some money to save, right? And of course, if you don't have money to save, you want to try to work towards getting some money to save. If you don't have any money to save, your first goal would be to get an emergency fund and try to just work on getting an emergency fund, which is basically, if you had a $500 or $1,000 emergency, work on trying to save that because a lot of Americans, and this is why there's so much need for stimulus right now, because so many Americans are behind. We have 25%, and if this is you, you're not alone, because there's 70 to 80 million Americans right now that can't even pay their bills. So this is why the pandemic has really put a damper and hardship on a lot of Americans right now. So that's just a kind of little bit of thoughts on the market, investing, and money, and how money works for me here today. Let me know your thoughts here, and that's just kind of how money works. Because I had some questions about the market. Last week the market kind of really crashed. Remember, over 50% of people have money in the markets, 401ks, pensions, IRAs, or just money in the market, and a lot of people get scared and sell off when they see the market go down. But the problem is if every time the market goes down and you rush to sell, you're going to end up losing with that strategy. Okay, so keep that in mind. Those are my thoughts on the market. I've had money in the stock market since well before 2008. I'm going to be turning 41 next month, but I've been having money in the market probably for 20 years now at this point. So let me know your thoughts here. I will keep you up to date here with everything. And I actually learned a lot when the pandemic hit, because that was a first for me when the actual whole country closed down. I actually learned a lot here too, because I thought, oh my God, this is it. The stock market is going to be kaput because the whole country's shutting down. But even then, the stock market came back so quickly, it even caught me by surprise then. So that I kind of learned my lesson there to say, well, at least for my long-term money, it's probably never worth it to ever take my money out of the stock market, money that I want to stay in there, because if the stock market came back that quickly, then uh, any money that I want to stay in there and grow, might as well just stay in there, because if it came back that quickly when the pandemic hit and the country closed down, and because of all that stimulus they put in there to keep the economy going, they'll basically do anything to keep the economy going at this point, at least in that regard. So I will keep you up to date here with everything. Let me know your thoughts here, and we will definitely have more discussions here on pretty much everything you need to know about here. So subscribe down below if you haven't yet. It's completely free to do so you don't miss out on new videos. You can click here to watch my newest video next. Or you can click here to watch my video that I just did about all the different states that are going to be issuing stimulus checks that I talked about here. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.